Good morning, lads. Today we're going to be talking about books. I am going to be recommending the best books I think for beginner filmmakers. And as you can see, I am quite a big reader myself, so let's get into it. I have to say, not all of these books are mine. It's like half and half with my girlfriend. For instance, all of those green books there are veterinary science, and I've read barely any of them. But let's get to it. The way I will be recommending these books is by breaking them into 4 categories. I'm not going to do a top like top 10, 9, 8, etc. But rather I'll do 4 categories. First will be books that talk about cinema as an art, then books that talk about how to make cinema, certain parts of it, then biographies, because I think are important, and lastly, books that will just motivate you to pick up a camera and go make a film yourself. Before starting with the recommendations, I think it's important to say that reading books is fundamental to understand cinema. Of course, watching films and making films is very, very important indeed, but reading books gives us another speed at which we learn about cinema. We have to really focus on the thing we're reading. We cannot be on our phones while we read because we are not going to get any of it. And the experience of getting lost in the words of a director or someone speaking about a director, a writer, a film, I think gives you a different dimension of what filmmaking is and really complements the experience of watching films. I have to say some of these books will be in Spanish, some of them will be in English, but I will be giving you the titles in English, of course. So let's start with books that talk about filmmaking as an art form. I've got 2 here. The first one is by Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. He's got a few books, but my favorite and probably the most famous is Sculpting in Time. This little book here, first time I read it, I didn't really get much of it. It's quite dense, but the main idea is that filmmakers work with time the same way sculptors work with, say, stone. So if a sculptor is carving his statue in stone, we are carving our art in time. We have to pick those interesting moments of the life of our characters. Just as his films is a bit dense, but every word is worth it. He was a great writer as well as a great filmmaker, so I really recommend it, and I also recommend watching his films if you haven't. Let's move on now to an American filmmaker. We're talking about Paul Schrader. He is a writer of Taxi Driver and he's the director of The Card Counter with Oscar Isaac, which is quite recent and very, very good. And this is actually his PhD thesis, and it's called The Transcendental Style in Cinema, which is in Spanish. It is an analysis of Osu, Yasujiro Osu, Bresson and Dreyer, 3 directors that made some of the most important films in the genre slow cinema. It is quite hard because we are used to many different inputs fighting for our attention, and slow cinema is not. Slow cinema, you really have to commit to it to get the reward out of that film. So me saying it's hard doesn't mean it's bad. The other way, actually, you get really rewarded for your efforts. And so in this film, he talks about how Bresson, Ozu and Dreyer make this slow cinema an experience that is almost religious, and his opinions and takes on their films. We're gonna move on now to books that talk about important aspects of making films. Me, myself, I obsess with the screenplay. It is the first stone in the building of your film, and it is also the cheapest part. You don't need to hire anyone, you don't need to buy cameras, you don't need to rent a space to write your screenplay. And it is also the reason most of my films that I don't like suck, is because I didn't give enough time to the screenplay, even though I obsessed with it. So the main book that everyone's going to recommend, and me as well, is by Robert McKee, here El Guion, it's in Spanish of course. I've got a few more books about screenwriting like Save the Cards or How to Make a Good Screenplay Excellent, but this one is the base. You read this one, you're good to go. This same author, Robert McKee, has some other books, like I think I have one here, yeah, like the dialogue, but it's not just, this is so complete. Here you've got everything you need to know about writing a screenplay that works. Once you read this, you should still read about screenwriting, but this is the absolute base. And me, I'm a writer, director, so first I talk about screenwriting, now I talk about directing. The book I'm going to talk about is by Sidney Lumet, and by reading this book I got to understand what is it that a director does. So the title is quite straightforward and it's called Making Movies. this was in Spanish as well. And in this book, Sidney Lumet explains the basics of filmmaking with his experience in films like 12 Angry Men. And there are concepts that could be quite obvious, but thanks to this book, I got into my mind and I used in every film that I've made since. Which is, for instance, if your DP is lighting the room and we are shooting here, yeah, there's 4 walls in this living room. If he lights this wall, well, shoot everything that happens with this wall in the back so you don't have to light it again, which is quite an easy and obvious thing, but when you're starting, you just go through the motions and you might forget that there are easier ways to do it. Also, how to direct actors, how to talk with the crew, everything's here. Great book about directing. And after you write a movie and you direct it, you have to edit it. And this book, In the Blink of an Eye, is the best editing book I've read. Also, it is a very dear book of mine. My girlfriend got it to me like 4 years ago. I had been after this book for a while, but it was quite hard to get in Spain, and I don't know how she did it. Now you can buy it on Amazon, but like 4 years ago, it was nowhere to be found, and someone brought it from the USA, I don't know, but it's a great book, and the main thing it talks about is when to cut, which is such a simple yet hard concept, because why cutting here, not 3 frames before or 3 frames after? And I think it is a very interesting concept that I had not stopped to think about until I read this book. We're gonna jump now to biographies, but before there was this book, I didn't know where to categorize it, so it's going to be in between practicalities and biographies. This book is the conversation that Hitchcock had with Truffaut, and that was made into this book. Of course, Hitchcock, the master of suspense, and Truffaut is Francois Truffaut, the great French director of the Nouvelle Vague. So it is not a biography, but it talks about the life of Hitchcock, what he thought about cinema as an art, cinema as a job, what Truffaut thinks about it, how he shoots scenes to keep suspense. So it is a great deep dive into his mind, the mind of Truffaut, and the way these 2 different people understood cinema. Now, getting into biographies, this is very subjective topic. Of course, read the biographies of your favorite filmmakers. The 3 I'm giving you, one of them is my favorite director of all time, but the other ones, I just really enjoyed their biography, and that's why I'm recommending it. The first one is Spanish director Luis Buñuel. The title, this one is in Spanish, so it is Mi Último Suspiro, which is My Last Breath, and it is just the story of his life. He moved to France and then he was exiled off Spain due to the Civil War. He made most of his films in Mexico, although he came here to shoot a film during the fascist dictatorship in Spain, and how he managed the censorship. It is a great book about another time. Like, for instance, the first film he made, a mate of his told him, if I win the lottery, I will pay for your film. The mate of his won the lottery, and that's how he made his first film, which was a documentary. And it's just a great book, and he's just such a legend of Spanish and European cinema that I had to talk about him. We move on now to Akira Kurosawa's autobiography. He is a great director, but reading about his life, his infancy in Japan, of course, Japan is so far away from Europe, so different from the Western world, yet so similar in some things. They're learning about how this absolute master of directing came to the job of directing, how he started making films is great. Also, it's very interesting that he only talks about his life until his first film, because he considers that his life, his biography, is told through his films after he made it the first one. So also very interesting concept, definitely recommend it. And lastly, this is my favorite director of all time. He is a genius. He is the one that I would love to emulate, and he is Fellini in his book Fellini by Fellini. He is the reason I think Italian films are the best sorts of European films. His films are so dreamlike, original, and he lived through the Second World War, the fascist Italy. He talks about how he started making films, how he lived in Italy, and how he went to Rome and made Rome his city. It's just favorite director of all time, greatest films of all time. I love him and I love his biography. And now let's get into the last section of the video. Well, I'll be talking about books that will just make you want to make films. So if we ended the biography sections with my favorite director of all time, let's talk about one of my favorite writer directors, who is Billy Wilder, and his Cameron Crowe's book Conversations with Wilder. Here Billy Wilder sort of talks about his life, but I think it's so encouraging to make films, the way he writes, the way he admires other directors. He says in this book that he had this sign in his office that would say, "How would Lovitz do it?" And he's just such an inspired filmmaker and such an inspiring life. The way he worked with other creators like Raymond Chandler, which is one of my favorite writers of noirs. So yeah, absolutely marvelous, this one. Let's move on now to a book written by a producer, actually, Roger Corman's How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime, which is his story of how he made many movies in Hollywood without losing money, how he made low budget, how he shot in the same set they were shooting a big budget movie, so he would go at night and use that set to shoot the movie. He was a great producer, great American producer. He produced films alongside Scorsese, De Niro, Ford Coppola, Jack Nicholson. He's an absolute master of the Hollywood industry of films, and this book really makes you want to start, right? You see how he started, how he was fearless, and he just went on with it. I dare you to read this book, not want to just pick up your camera and go shoot a film. It's impossible. And lastly, I think the book that motivated me the most, because I felt like we had things in common, is Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez. He made a film with only $3,000, and that was El Mariachi, and it was a great hit. And this is the book, this is the diary actually, of how he made that film. He's going to make you feel like you can do the same, which is shoot a low budget film that will be a hit in Hollywood, and you will feel disappointed if you don't make it. You have to think this is Robert Rodriguez, he's a master. You may not be, I'm not just yet, but the way he talks about his life being young, how he shoots with no resources, I think it's so relatable, especially the passion. Even if his success is not relatable, he's passionate. And this book for aspiring filmmakers is just a book that says, don't be afraid, pick up your camera and make that film. So yeah, this has been the list of books that I think are most important for aspiring filmmakers. Any one of these books is great, you can read them all. Of course, there'll be people that tell you to read Shakespeare, or you've got Kubrick. There are so many good books about film. If you like films, if you want to make films, read about them. Don't only watch them, truly read about them. I think it's going to expand the ideas you might already have about films. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you maybe get to read one of these, and if you do, please let me know in the comments. Again, thank you very much. Adios. What about you? Are you gonna read any of the books?